The house was built with 2 signatures, but sold with only one. I remember the desk where we first signed. Oak, institutional, borrowed light from a window that faced north. The realtor's office smelled like coffee that had been reheated twice. David's hand touched mine as we reached for the same pen. We laughed. The notary smiled at us the way people smile at couples who still touch without thinking. March 2011. Our names appeared side by side on every page. Mortgage, title, deed, joint tenancy with right of survivorship. The lawyer explained what it meant. We barely listened. We were building something. That was the world as I knew it. 2 names, 1 life, a house we would fill with years. This isn't fiction. This is how trust disappears, 1 document at a time. The house came to us in stages. First the mortgage, then the furniture, then the arguments about where things should go. David wanted the couch facing the window. I wanted it facing the fireplace. We compromised, which meant we moved it 3 times in the first month and stopped noticing where it sat by the second. That's what a home is, the accumulation of small surrenders that stop feeling like surrender at all. We painted the bedroom a color called morning mist that looked gray in daylight and blue at dusk. David did the edges. I did the walls. There was paint in my hair for a week. He kept finding streaks of it on the pillowcases, laughing every time. The house smelled like primer and takeout and the vanilla candles I burned to cover both. I started a garden that first spring. Nothing ambitious. Tomatoes, basil, 2 lavender plants that never quite thrived. David built the raised beds on a Saturday, measuring twice, cutting once, the way his father taught him. He brought me coffee while I knelt in the dirt, planting things I wasn't sure would survive. Most of them did. That felt like proof of something. Sunday mornings, he made pancakes. Terrible ones at first, better over time. The kitchen would fill with the smell of butter and batter, and we'd sit at the table we'd bought from a couple moving to Oregon, and we'd read different sections of the newspaper without speaking. Comfortable silence, the kind that doesn't need filling. I didn't know then that silence could also mean concealment. We were ordinary. That was the point. We were building an ordinary life, and it felt extraordinary because it was ours. Both of ours. Every light switch, every creaking floorboard, every window that stuck in summer, we inherited them together. When the roof needed repair, we argued about contractors and made the decision as a unit. When the water heater died at midnight, we stood in the basement in our bathrobes, shivering and laughing, waiting for the emergency plumber who charged double. Our names were on everything. The mortgage statement that came the first Tuesday of every month, the property tax bill each November, the homeowner's insurance renewal. I filed them in the cabinet in the hallway, the one with the broken handle we kept meaning to fix. Each document confirmation that we owned this space equally, that it belonged to both of us in ways that transcended sentiment. I had no reason to check if that was still true. The fracture began with efficiency. David started handling all the paperwork. Not suddenly, so gradually I didn't notice the shift. He'd always been better with numbers, more patient with bureaucracy. I worked longer hours at the clinic. He worked from home 3 days a week. It made sense when he suggested he'd take over the bills, the insurance renewals, the tedious correspondence with the bank about refinancing. "I've got it," he said, when I reached for the mortgage statement one evening. "Already filed." I thanked him. I meant it. By the time the leaves changed that year, I'd stopped looking in the filing cabinet entirely. Why would I? He was handling it. We were a team, division of labor. I managed the groceries and the garden and the appointments. He managed the paperwork and the finances and the future. Some betrayals arrive wearing the mask of kindness. The first sign was small enough to dismiss. December, maybe early January. I was looking for our tax documents and couldn't find the folder where I usually kept them. I asked David. "Already with the accountant," he said, not looking up from his laptop. "Dropped them off last week." "Both of ours?" "Everything. It's handled." There was something in his tone. Not quite irritation, but close. The way you speak to someone who's questioning your competence. I let it go. He was managing things. I should be grateful. But the question lingered. Small and persistent, like a seed that finds its way into soil you didn't know was there. In February, the mailbox started feeling lighter. Not empty. There were still catalogs, local ads, the occasional bill from my student loans, but the steady rhythm of mortgage statements, insurance documents, property tax notices, all of that had quieted. I told myself David had probably switched everything to online delivery. Paperless, better for the environment, modern. I didn't ask. Asking felt like doubt, and doubt felt like betrayal. After 14 years, you're supposed to trust without verifying. That's what partnership means. But I started noticing other things, small things. David's phone, which used to sit face up on the kitchen counter, now rested face down. He changed his passcode, said it was for work security. He started closing his laptop when I walked into the room, a reflexive gesture he tried to make casual. Just finishing up, he'd say, always finishing up. There was a new cologne, faint but distinct, that appeared on his shirts. When I mentioned it, he said a client had given it to him as a gift. I said it smelled nice. I didn't say that I'd started cataloging every unfamiliar scent, every late evening at the office, every weekend conference that appeared on the calendar with less and less advance. Notice. I became an archaeologist of my own life, excavating meaning from fragments. March brought longer absences. April brought locked doors. May brought a distance that felt physical even when we occupied the same room. We still slept in the same bed, our bodies inches apart, a canyon between us. I told myself it was work stress. I told myself all marriages have seasons. I told myself I was imagining things. The heart knows before the mind allows it to. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon in June. I was at work, between patients, eating a salad at my desk and scrolling through nothing in particular. The number was local, but unfamiliar. I almost didn't answer. Mrs. Chen. Speaking. This is Patricia Walters from Summit Title Company. I'm calling about the refinance paperwork we received last month. There's a small issue with the documentation, and we need your signature on a few additional forms. I stopped chewing. I'm sorry, what refinance? A pause. The kind that carries weight. The refinance on the property at 847 Maple Avenue. We worked with your husband. I'm sorry, I assumed you were aware. My office suddenly felt smaller. When was this? The paperwork was initiated in March. We closed 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago, I'd been planting the garden. David had helped me carry the bags of soil from the car. We joked about my optimistic overestimation of how many tomato plants we needed. He'd kissed my forehead, dirt-smudged and content. I see, I said, though I didn't. Can you send me copies of the documents? Of course. Though I should mention, you're not listed as a co-borrower on the new loan, just your husband. That's actually why we're calling. There's a question about the title that, well, it might be better to discuss this with your attorney. The room had stopped making sense. The walls, the desk, the half-eaten salad, all of it felt borrowed from someone else's life. I'll call you back, I said, and ended the call before she could respond. I sat there for 7 minutes. I timed it later when I checked my phone and saw the gap between the call and the next thing I did. 7 minutes of perfect stillness, my body understanding what my mind refused to process. Then I called David. It rang 4 times. Hey, I'm in a meeting. Can I call you back? Did we refinance the house? Silence. Not the comfortable kind. I'll be home at 6, he said. We'll talk then. The line went dead. I left work early, told them I was sick, which was true in a way that had nothing to do with my body. I drove home through streets I'd driven 1,000 times, every turn familiar and suddenly foreign. The house came into view, white siding, blue trim, the garden beds David had built, the roof we'd repaired together, our house. Except maybe it wasn't. Not anymore. I parked in the driveway and sat in the car until my legs felt steady enough to carry me inside. The key still worked. That felt important somehow. Proof that I still belonged here, at least in the most literal sense. The filing cabinet, the one with the broken handle we'd never fixed. I knelt in front of it, pulled open the drawer. It was organized, meticulous, every document in its labeled folder. Mortgage, insurance, taxes, utilities. I pulled out the mortgage folder. The first document was from 2011. Both our names, joint tenancy, pages and gauges of signatures, initials, dates, then the annual statements, regular as clockwork, showing our joint obligation, our joint equity, our joint future. Then, March 2024. A new document. Refinance agreement. New terms, better rate, the kind of financial optimization that would have made sense to discuss with your spouse. One name, David Chen, sole borrower. The property description was correct. 847 Maple Avenue. But where my name should have been, there was only white space. I flipped through the pages. My signature appeared nowhere. The title remained joint. That would have required my explicit consent to change. But the mortgage, the debt, the financial instrument that bound us to this property now listed only him. I sat on the hallway floor, documents spread around me like evidence at a crime scene. This is how you discover that your life has been edited. You don't find a love letter or a receipt from a hotel. You find paperwork. Dry, legal, irrefutable paperwork that says you are no longer an equal partner in the thing you built together. David came home at 6:15. I heard his car in the driveway, the familiar sound of his key in the lock, his footsteps in the entryway. He called my name. I was still in the hallway, sitting against the wall, the documents in my lap. He stopped when he saw me. His face did something complicated. Guilt and frustration and something else I couldn't name. "We should talk in the kitchen," he said. "We can talk here." He sank down across from me, his back against the opposite wall. We sat like that, facing each other with 8 feet and 14 years between us. "I was going to tell you," he said. "When?" "Soon. I needed to handle it first." "Handle what, David? Removing me from our house?" "It's not like that." "Then what is it like?" He looked at the documents in my lap, then away. "The interest rate was killing us. We could save $300 a month by refinancing. But your credit score, the medical bills from your dad's illness, that affected it. We couldn't get the best rate with both of us on the loan. So you refinanced without me." "So I refinanced in my name. The house is still ours. The title hasn't changed. This is just the mortgage." "Just the mortgage?" "It's a financial decision, Sarah. It's not personal." I laughed. It sounded wrong in the quiet hallway. "We bought this house together. We signed those papers at the same desk, you remember? You held my hand. The notary smiled at us." "I remember." "And now my name is gone. From the mortgage. Not from the house. Not from our life." But that wasn't true, and we both knew it. The mortgage wasn't just a financial instrument. It was a promise. It was proof of commitment. It was the thing that said, "I am tied to you and this place in ways that transcend convenience or credit scores." "You should have told me," I said. "I know. You should have asked me." "Would you have agreed?" I didn't answer. The truth was, I didn't know. Maybe I would have seen his logic. Maybe I would have signed Away's name on the new documents if he'd explained it right. But he hadn't given me the choice. That was the point. He'd decided what was best for us without including me in the decision. He'd edited our life without my consent. "Is there someone else?" I asked. The question surprised us both. "What? No, Sarah, this isn't about no." "Then what is it about?" He was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was different, smaller. "I don't know. I guess I needed something to be mine. Just mine. Does that make sense?" It did, in the worst possible way. It made perfect, devastating sense. We sat in that hallway until the light changed, neither of us moving, neither of us speaking. The house settled around us with its familiar creaks and sighs, and I understood that this place, which I had thought was ours, had become his in ways I couldn't undo by simply staying. The weeks that followed were strange in their quietness. There was no dramatic exit, no shouting, no broken dishes. David slept in the guest room because I asked him to, and he went without argument. We moved around each other with practiced courtesy, 2 people sharing space, but no longer sharing a life. I hired a lawyer, a kind woman named Rebecca, who listened to my story without judgment and explained my options with patience. The title was still joint, which meant the house was still legally ours. But the mortgage being in his name created complications. If we divorced, if we sold, if anything happened, it would be messy. "Did he forge your signature?" Rebecca asked. "No, he just refinanced in his name only." That requires some creative maneuvering. The original mortgage would have had clauses preventing that without both borrowers' consent. "How did he do it?" She showed me the paperwork. Apparently, when you have 14 years of managing all the household finances, when you have access to all the accounts and statements and documentation, when you know exactly how to navigate the system. It's not that hard to convince a bank that you're acting on behalf of both parties, especially if you're willing to sign affidavits confirming your spouse is aware and agreeable. He'd lied, in writing, on legal documents. What do you want to do? Rebecca asked. I didn't know. The house was just a house, wood and drywall, and the creaky floorboard outside the bathroom. But it was also the place where I'd planted a garden and painted walls and built a life. It was the evidence of who I'd been and who I'd thought I was becoming. How do you grieve something you're still living inside? By August, I'd made a decision. I would leave, but not yet. I would stay in this house, in the life we'd built, until I understood what I was leaving behind. I watched David with new eyes, not with anger. Anger had come and gone, leaving only clarity in its wake. I watched him make his terrible pancakes on Sunday mornings, a routine he'd maintained even as everything else collapsed. I watched him water my garden when I forgot, keeping the tomatoes alive out of habit or guilt, or some vestige of care that neither of us knew how to name. He wasn't a villain. That would have been easier. He was just a man who'd mistaken control for security, who'd confused management with partnership, who'd forgotten that love requires witness. We spoke sometimes. Small exchanges about groceries or bills, or the leak in the upstairs bathroom. Once, late at night, when neither of us could sleep, we sat together in the living room and talked about nothing. A movie we'd both seen, a news story that didn't matter. For 20 minutes, we were almost the people we used to be. Then he went back to the guest room, and I went back to the bedroom we'd painted together, and the house held its breath around us. I found myself returning to the filing cabinet, not out of suspicion anymore, but out of something else. A need to trace the timeline of our unraveling. I pulled out folders at random, insurance policies, tax returns, utility bills. Each document told a story about the life we'd made. Then I found the folder labeled Future Plans. I'd forgotten about it. We'd started it in 2012, filling it with brochures and notes about someday, travel we'd take, renovations we'd make, dreams we'd itemized and filed away for later. There was a napkin with a sketch David had drawn of the kitchen we'd talked about remodeling, a printout of a bed and breakfast in Vermont we'd promised to visit for our 15th anniversary, a list in my handwriting of baby names we'd considered before we'd decided we were happy with just us. Just us. What a lie that had turned out to be. You can't be just us when one person is editing the other out, one document at a time. At the bottom of the folder was a photograph. The realtor had taken it on closing day. David and me standing in front of the house, holding the keys between us. We looked impossibly young. We looked certain. I took the photograph to the bedroom and set it on the nightstand. Every morning, I woke up to that image, the people we'd been, smiling at the future they couldn't yet see. September brought cooler nights and the first leaves changing. The garden was dying back, tomatoes slowing, basil turning leggy and bitter. I should have pulled it all out, cleared the beds for winter. I didn't. David asked one evening, "Do you want help with the garden?" "No," I said. "I've got it," but I didn't. I let it go. Let the tomatoes rot on the vine and the weeds take over. Some things need to die properly, need to be witnessed in their decay. Rebecca called with news. She'd found inconsistencies in the refinance paperwork, places where David's representations to the bank didn't align with reality. We could challenge it if I wanted. We could undo what he'd done. What would that accomplish? I asked. It would restore you to the mortgage, make you equal borrowers again. But would it make us equal? She didn't answer. She didn't have to. The confrontation we'd never really had finally came in October, not with shouting or tears, but with clarity. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table we'd bought from the couple moving to Oregon, and we spoke the truth for the first time in months. I want to sell the house, I said. David's hands were wrapped around his coffee mug. He didn't look up. Okay. I'm not doing this to punish you. I know. I just can't live in something that doesn't belong to me anymore. It does belong to you. Legally, David, stop. He stopped. The refrigerator hummed. The clock on the wall ticked. Outside, a dog barked twice and then went quiet. I'm sorry, he said. I don't know how many times I can say it. I don't need you to say it. I need you to understand what you did. I do understand. I took something from you. I made a decision that wasn't mine to make alone. I know that. It's not just the house, I said. It's that you showed me who we really were. After 14 years, I thought we were partners. Equal, but we weren't. Not really. Maybe we never were. That's not fair. No, I agreed. It's not fair. None of this is fair. We sat in silence. I thought about all the meals we'd shared at this table, all the ordinary evenings that had added up to a life. How many hours do you spend with someone before you realize you've been building parallel lives instead of a shared one? I loved you, David said. I still do. I know, but love isn't enough when trust is gone. Can we get it back? I looked at him. Really looked at him. His face was familiar in ways that made my chest ache. Every line, every expression, every gesture mapped and memorized. We'd built this life together. But somewhere along the way, he'd started building a version of it without me. I don't think so, I said. He nodded. He'd already known. The house sold in December, fast market, good location, the real estate agent said. We got more than we'd paid for it. Much more. The equity split evenly between us, because that's what the title said. Joint tenancy, equal ownership, the legal fiction we'd maintained even after the emotional truth had changed. We signed the papers at a different desk this time. Modern office, sleek furniture, a notary who smiled professionally but didn't seem to see us at all. We signed separately, David in the morning, me in the afternoon. I didn't want to share that moment with him. Didn't want to make it ceremonial or meaningful. It was just paperwork. That's all any of it had ever been. In the end, I drove by the house one last time before the new owners took possession. It looked the same. White siding, blue trim, the garden beds empty now, but still visible in the yard. Someone else would fill them with plants. Someone else would argue about couch placement and paint colors. Someone else would believe that signatures on documents meant forever. I didn't stop the car, just drove past slowly, memorizing it, letting it go. I rent now, a small apartment on the other side of town, 1 bedroom, efficient kitchen, no garden. My name is on the lease, and only my name, and there's a strange peace in that. This space is undeniably mine. No joint tenancy, no shared mortgage, no illusion of partnership. I've started sleeping better. Not every night, but more nights than not. The apartment is quiet in ways the house never was. No familiar creaks, no haunted hallways, no walls that remember what we used to be. Sometimes I think about David. Wonder if he bought another house, if he thinks about what we had, if he understands yet what he lost. Not just me, but the version of himself that could have been better. The version that asked instead of decided, that included instead of controlled, that trusted me enough to share the difficulty as well as the comfort. I saw him once, 3 months after the sale, at the grocery store, of all places. He was in the produce section, examining tomatoes with the same careful attention he'd always had. He didn't see me. I watched him for a moment, this man I'd shared 14 years with, and felt nothing but a distant fondness, like remembering someone from high school, important once, irrelevant now. I left before he could notice me. Some chapters close not with dramatic finality, but with the quiet realization that there's nothing left to say. The papers arrived last week. Final divorce decree. It's done now, officially, in the eyes of the law. We are no longer bound by mortgage or marriage or any illusion of permanence. I signed the document at my kitchen table, the small one I'd bought from IKEA, assembled myself with the Allen wrench and the illustrated instructions. Just my name on the signature line. Just my decision. Just my life moving forward. There's a box in my closet with things I kept from the house. The photograph from closing day, a few of David's sketches, a pressed flower from the garden. I haven't opened it in months. Maybe I never will. Some artifacts are meant to be stored, not examined, but I think about that desk sometimes, the oak one from the realtor's office where we first signed our names together. How young we were. How certain. How completely unaware that signatures could be edited, that promises were only as permanent as the person keeping them, that love could exist alongside erasure. I don't regret those 14 years. They happened. They were real. But I've learned something essential. You cannot build a future with someone who's willing to rewrite the past. You cannot trust someone who treats partnership as a solo act. You cannot share a life with someone who's already decided you're optional. The papers are still joint tenancy in my memory. I will always be the woman who signed those documents, who believed in that future, who thought 2 names meant forever. But I'm also the woman who found her name missing and chose to leave rather than fight for a place she'd already lost. Both truths exist: the love and the betrayal, the promise and the revision, the house we built and the one I had to walk away from. Peace came quietly, like all important things do, not with fireworks or revelation, but with the simple realization that I was still here, still breathing, still capable of building something new, even if this time I build it alone. I planted herbs in pots on my balcony last spring. Basil, mostly. It grows better in containers than it ever did in the ground, and there's a metaphor in that somewhere if I care to look for it. I don't. Sometimes a plant is just a plant, and sometimes survival is its own meaning. The apartment smells like basil now on warm mornings. I make terrible pancakes sometimes, learning from scratch because I never paid attention when David made them. They're getting better. Everything does. Given enough time and attention. I am learning to be a person whose name stands alone on documents. It feels less like loss now and more like honesty. This is who I am. This is what I own. This is the life I'm building with clear eyes and no illusions. And if I sometimes miss the comfort of two signatures, the warmth of shared ownership, the safety of believing someone when they promise forever, well, missing something is not the same as needing it back. The desk where we signed those papers is gone now, repurposed or replaced by some other couple, making promises they believe will last. I hope they do better than we did. I hope their signatures remain side by side, equal and undisturbed, for all the years they've promised each other. But I also hope they know love is not the same as partnership, and partnership is not the same as paper. What matters is not the name on the document, but the person who chooses, every single day, to keep you there. I learned that too late, but I learned it. And that, in the end, is its own kind of signature. Indelible, honest, entirely my own.